I've been reading a brand new book. I met the author at the last Buddhist Recovery Network conference, and it's called The Urge, Our History of Addiction. And it's pretty interesting. Very sort of covering a lot of bases. The author is in recovery, and he's a professor at Columbia, so he's smart. Carl Eric Fisher. And so it's kind of like it's historical and sociological and spiritual in the sense of like bringing up spiritual issues. But got some good anecdotes because it does things like about tobacco and different, not just alcohol. As well as like, that's the beginning of the book is more historical. And then it has like the opioid epidemic and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, pretty interesting. Because sort of theories about addiction, he's sort of trying to address all the theories of addiction and not sort of take a stance, which I kind of respect, that tendency to like, oh, it's because of this, everybody, it's because, and trying to find like that one cause behind addiction. And he's just like brings in a lot of factors, which I think is probably closer to the truth than just trying to point at one or two factors. Anyway, thought I would just mention that for those who are interested in a topic like that. I've also been doing a lot of Dharma reading and reading a lot of Thich Nhat Hanh this week, which really I mentioned this the other day. I was first, I first encountered Thich Nhat Hanh as a teacher, not in person, although I saw him speak a couple of times, but, first encountered his teachings, back in the 80s. And he was very important for my practice at that time. And really for more than just my practice, for like my own way of being, and the whole sort of spiritual life, because he had a really special way of presenting the Dharma that made it very accessible and very kind, where you felt included kind of, and you felt taken care of in a way, like you didn't have to like achieve something. I'm not sure I'm capturing quite the right word, but I think I'm conveying the idea. In any case, I haven't been studying his work for a long time. And so to go back and start reading him again, from a different place than where I was when I first encountered him is really interesting. And just seeing how brilliant he was. And really knowledgeable. I don't think I recognize the depth of his knowledge. Besides, clearly the depth of his practice, his presence was, that depth was self-evident in any encounter. But he also knew, a lot about the Pali Canon and the suttas and everything that I talk about a lot. He was very educated in all that. I suppose not surprising. Anyway, he has inspired me to try to be more mindful, which is, interesting. Just it's my confession that I could be more mindful. Because I think that, and we'll start to meditate in a minute, but I'll just finish this thought. I think most people, I sort of allow the energy of my life and my day to just kind of sweep me along sometimes. And I kind of feel like I have the Dharma as a companion in that, and certainly as a, that I am still looking at my life through that lens. But in terms of just really being grounded in the present moment, day by day, I let that slip, I think, more than I need to. And I think because I sort of got to a place where I thought that I couldn't establish that solid daily mindfulness. You might be wondering why you're the student and I'm the teacher at this moment, But so if you feel like you could be more present and mindful in your life, I actually recommend that you read, pick up the books that I've been looking at are Breathe, You Are Alive, Peace in Every Step, and his first really well-known book, The Miracle of Mindfulness. Each of them really kind of draws you into this sense of just the ease of just keep coming back to your breath and into your body throughout the day. So that's the report from Vincenti Avenue. Where the lemon tree has given bountifully from its fruit. It's a great deal. If you are in the neighborhood, there are lemons out front in a bowl to be had, to be taken. So let us sit together as we can be under these circumstances. And of course, in some ways, more together than we could be. Certainly more together than we could be were it not for Zoom. So thanks to Zoom, as much as we complain about it. It's like having a job, I hate my job, but I'm grateful that I have a job. That kind of, anyway. Yes, grounding into your body. I think I'll just ring the bell to get us started, and maybe that'll help me to calm down. So letting your body come into stillness. And as you do that, just checking in on how you're holding your body. Want to find a balance between being upright and being relaxed. And if you need to be lying down, you can do that as well. Whatever posture really supports your mindfulness and your capacity to be present. So taking a little time just to let the body find that spot of balance and comfort. And you can close your eyes or just lower your gaze, starting to feel the breath moving in the body. Let the breath deepen naturally, not forcing that, but just letting your body be open to a deeper breath. As the breath deepens, it can also slow. But just letting the breath reach its natural rhythm, natural depth. Where do you feel your breath? Is it just the sort of movement and the whole experience? Or does your mind like to draw in close with the touch at the nostrils or the movement of the belly? There isn't one right way to pay attention to the breath. We just want to do what supports our awareness, what supports and makes it easier for us to just be with the breath. Feeling the breath coming in, feeling the breath going out. Letting the breath soften and calm the body. So this is a little different from just being aware of the breath, starting to use the breath, starting to apply the breath to a particular purpose. We don't have to strain to do that. It's actually quite natural. As we become aware of the breath, and let mindfulness of the breath come to the foreground of our experience. There's a natural way in which the breath calms the body. And see if you can connect with that. And then seeing if, along with awareness of the breath and awareness of the body, you can bring in just awareness of your felt experience, what's called the feeling tone. It's kind of the answer to the question, how are you feeling? This can have a mental component, a physical component, an emotional component. It really depends. So just checking in with yourself, seeing if you can tune in to the feeling tone in this moment. So staying with the breath. The breath is really our constant companion in our mindfulness practice. The breath, but also feeling the whole body, the feeling tone. And then noticing thoughts that take you away. What's the nature of those thoughts? What qualities, what focus do they have? Where does your mind tend to go? If you find yourself lost and out of touch with breath and body, coming back to that very simple foundational aspect of practice, just being with the breath. We can't just stop our minds from thinking. So it's not a failure to be lost in thought. It's quite natural to the process. And as we sit, things sometimes get quieter. Thoughts become less intrusive. We can feel the breath, feel the body, sense the feeling tone and the mind states more and more clearly as the thoughts quiet down. Before I start, there was a question about the waiting room, how that works. And I don't let people in from the waiting room until just about the hour, top of the hour, sometimes a couple minutes before. But no matter what time you decide to join the meeting, you won't get into it until I click the thing that says everybody can come in. So that's how that works. Nothing personal going on. If you're feeling excluded, why am I being left? It'd be nice if the waiting room could be a place where people could talk to each other, but maybe Zoom has that capacity. I don't know about it. So, we've been talking about the 4 foundations of mindfulness as sort of an expanded aspect of practicing these principles in all our affairs, and certainly being mindful in our daily lives is a really great way to support practicing the principles. But it occurred to me, sort of realized that I haven't been talking a lot about recovery in a way, addressing it specifically, and sometimes that happens. I just get absorbed in the Buddhist sort of lens of things, and either forget or choose to not necessarily integrate it with recovery. So just if anybody's been coming and sort of disappointed that you haven't been hearing much recovery lately, I apologize for that. I'll try to bring that in a bit more tonight. So the point we have reached is the 4th of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which is, often it's not even translated from the Pali. It's just called Mindfulness of Dhammas, which is Dhamma is the Pali version of Dharma, but it doesn't mean it apparently in the sort of sense of the whole teachings, like the word Dharma usually refers to, but has this other more sort of technical meaning that some translate as phenomena. In any case, the sutta says that we should be mindful of a few different really categories of experience, and interestingly, both Bhikkhu Bodhi and Venerable Analayo pick out these 2 lists from. There's several lists in the sutta, but both of them point to these 2 lists as being the ones that are really the most useful and sort of most obvious, I think, in a way, ones to pay attention to. They are the 5 hindrances and the 7 factors of awakening, and they are contrasting in that the 7 factors of awakening, or the 7 factors of enlightenment, are the things that need to be developed in order to have a enlightenment experience, or what we could call a spiritual awakening. And the 5 hindrances are the things that get in the way of developing the 7 factors of awakening. So they have this relationship in that sense. But I thought I would read a little bit of what Venerable Analayo says, which I think is quite interesting and typical of him. It is deep, meaning it's not as simple. He says, with contemplation of dharmas, he calls it dharmas instead of dhammas. In any case, with contemplation of dharmas, an active exploration of conditionality is an explicit part of the instructions. What are the conditions that lead to the arising of the hindrances or the awakening factors? What are the conditions for overcoming the former and fostering the latter? Mindfully exploring these conditions is the central task of contemplation of Dhammas. So conditionality, like how do we get into this trouble and how do we get out of it? So that, as I read that today, I did think, well, this is a similar question that we ask ourselves about our addiction. How do I, how did I get into that, and how can I get out of it? So that's one of the questions we ask the newcomer, right, or the person who's considering recovery, or is trying to figure out what's wrong with them. What are you doing that's making this happen? And one of the things that I often bring up with somebody who's struggling to stay sober or to stay in recovery is notice what your triggers are. So that would be the conditionality, right? What are the conditions that set off your craving and thus your relapses? And I also think that the fourth step in the 12 steps, where we write a searching and fearless moral inventory, is a kind of deconstruction of the conditionality of our addiction. How it's kind of the story of how we got here, and well, it's very, it depends how you wrote it. In my case, it was pretty much a narrative of the ways that I harmed people in my life. But outside of that narrative, we can detect patterns, which are these causal links, right? That these patterns that kept putting us into these situations and kept us stuck in those places, and where we couldn't get out, where we couldn't change. And so, the 12 steps offer us this way out, and thus they're giving us the conditions for recovery. Here are some steps you can take that lead to, in 12-step terms, spiritual awakening. Not exactly the same as enlightenment in Buddhist terms, but pointing in the same direction. So what's encouraged in our meditation in real time is that we notice when one of the hindrances is present, or one or more of the hindrances is present, and also that we notice when one or more of the factors of awakening is present, and that we start to observe and work with them in a way that we start to see how to let go of the hindrances and how to develop the factors of awakening. So let me go through the two lists fairly briefly, just to clarify what we're talking about. So the hindrances are desire. Typically it's called sensual desire. So it's like really a craving. It's not just a general wanting, but it's specifically really a craving, and classically it is a sense craving, but it definitely can be a mental thing. I mean, the mind is considered a sense in Buddhism in any case. So we have desire and aversion, which are, I was talking about this on Tuesday in a different context of the third foundation. They're the two sides of the same coin. They can be seen as the wish for things to be different from the way they are. So this is like the kind of mental, sensual wanting that gets in the way of peace. Just say that. And then the next two are more physical, although they have a mental, and I would say an emotional component. So sloth and torpor, or sleepiness and dullness, and restlessness and worry. So that the physical component is pretty obvious. In the sleepiness is very common when we start to get relaxed in meditation, and it's quite apparent how that gets in the way of being mindful because you're asleep, right? Or partially asleep. Restlessness has that physical component of not being able to get still and never getting comfortable. It's a terrible a hindrance, because it's like you can't get started. Usually sleepiness happens after you get started, and then you've sort of settled. So at least you feel like you've done something. But restlessness feels like you can't get started in a way. And it just keeps, ants in the pants. Old expression for that. That's what your third grade teacher would tell you. But these also have the mental or emotional component, the dullness, which can also be depressive, and the worry and stress that can be anxiety. So they kind of hold these two energies as well. And again, I think it's pretty evident how those things get in the way of meditation. The depressive mind tends to ruminate and just go over and over negative thoughts and kind of build itself into a painful corner, whereas the anxious mind also ruminates, but not in a more one thing after another, not really going anywhere, and just fear-based. Kind of jumping around. So again, both of these make peace or any kind of inner joy inaccessible. So the hindrances, in a way, can be seen as like blockages, things that are standing in the way of these positive states. And then the fifth hindrance is doubt, which is can have classically it's the doubt of the teachings, but more commonly, I think for most people, it's doubt of ourselves, our own capacity. But it can be questioning the teacher, maybe I should find another teacher, or maybe I should try a different practice. So that kind of second guessing, you can again see how you need a degree of faith to practice. And we can say, like, there are classical antidotes to each of these. The antidote of desire is seeing the unsatisfactory nature of things, that you can't really, even if you get whatever you want, it's not really going to be the answer. The antidote to aversion is loving kindness or compassion, to be kind. The antidote to sleepiness is, obviously arousing energy, but mentally it's arousing interest. A lot of times, you're just sitting and it's just your breath. It's like, okay, I've been there, done that. This is boring. It's like, how can I get interested in the breath? Well, you need to start to look at it in a more precise way, but also things like what Venerable Anali was saying. Look at the conditionality of what's happening in this moment. What are the causes and conditions? The antidote to restlessness, is, well, it's concentration is the classical antidote, which means that we have to apply an effort to bring calm. But this too, I find, can be supported by a viewpoint, which is seeing the nature of our fears or our anxieties, if that's what's going on, and kind of realizing their empty nature, that they're just kind of created by the mind. The antidote to doubt, of course, is faith. But classically, it's also to study. So if you are questioning the teachings, the suggestion is study them more and you will not question them. There are two all-purpose antidotes that work on every hindrance. One is mindfulness. If we just bring mindfulness to the experience, there's a natural letting go that happens. And I suspect most, if not all of you, have experienced this at one time or another. Just like, oh, if I just come back to the breath, or if I just turn towards that, oh, it's okay. I can be with this feeling. Or you see the anger. Oh, look, there's anger. Oh, and you're just like, what am I doing? You're sort of seeing that so often the hindrances are things that we're just generating inside ourselves that are unnecessary. And that when we see them clearly, we realize I can just let go. So mindfulness helps us to let go of each of the hindrances. And then the other one, and this comes directly from Venerable Analayo, and I don't actually know where he got this because I haven't seen it in the suttas, but he says another antidote to the hindrances is noble friends and noble conversation, like connecting with other spiritual people, which is great because that's what people in recovery do as a matter of routine. So the hindrances, they're so interesting because mindfulness can free us. So and I say that because it's so interesting that they're, in a way, once you really see them clearly, how they can just dissolve, and you're like, oh, I thought that was such a problem, and then it just kind of goes away, and you're like, wow, where'd that go? Now, of course, that's not always the case when it's a really intense experience, which it can be. So there's just to recognize that there are sort of varying levels of the hindrances, which will, respond to varying levels of effort. And so that's, something we have to sort of examine in our own practice. So to go to the 7 factors of awakening, they start with mindfulness, and not surprisingly. And then mindfulness, there's a way in which we can kind of look at them as progressive. They're not, we don't necessarily have to see them. These can appear, I don't know, I won't want to say randomly, but they can appear out of order, shall we say. In any case, one way to think of them, though, as a kind of causal process is that we cultivate mindfulness. And as our mindfulness strengthens, we start to investigate. So the second factor is investigation. And that has sort of a technical meaning, but I think it's good enough to just say, like, really examine, look closely. And it does suggest this kind of looking at causality, like, how does this all happen? So there's mindfulness that then starts to really look closely. And what happens when we engage in that way, the investigation, is that energy arises, just the way that I said that's an antidote to sleepiness. So energy arises, the third of the 7 factors. And out of that energy comes this feeling of this uplift, this joy. And this can manifest as something subtle, or it can be quite intense in meditation. It's called piti when there's all this sort of energy that goes with it. But interestingly, what that feeling leads to, that feeling of joy actually leads to tranquility. And it's because when we start to see, when we start to feel this sense of rapture, it's satisfying. There's a sense of, oh, this is really nice. And you just kind of incline it towards tranquility. And then the tranquility leads to concentration. That's number 6. And then the concentration leads us to equanimity, which is this balance of mind, which is undisturbed by the pleasant or the unpleasant. That is undisturbed by the nature of impermanence, the fact that things are changing all the time. It doesn't mean that we don't feel things fully, but we don't, what it means is that in the state of equanimity, we don't get triggered into craving, which is how we stay then out of suffering, because craving is the cause of suffering. So, so it's worth kind of memorizing these two lists, or at least picking out certain aspects, like with the 7 factors, to kind of go, one of the things you can do is sort of, and I recommend this in one of my books, is do a kind of 7 factors inventory where you ask yourself, which of these qualities do I need to cultivate more of? Do I need more energy, or do I need more concentration? Should I do more investigation? Sort of, and then as you're meditating, see if you can cultivate that quality. And how would you do that? And how does that arise? So this is the question Analio is saying we need to examine, like, how do I cultivate concentration? How do I cultivate energy in my practice? How do I cultivate investigation? And I'm not sure anybody can give you the answers for you. There are suggestions for different things, right? But each of us has to kind of find our own path with this. And this is part of the really maturing of a meditation practice, is that we start to notice these factors. We're not just sitting, which is lovely to sit, be with the breath, the mind wanders, come back and relax, and start to let go of things and learn to be more at peace, and maybe learn loving kindness. There's lots of wonderful things that can come out of just a simple practice. But this is another way that we can kind of deepen our practice, start to become aware which hindrances really get in my way, and how can I let them go? Do I fall asleep every time I meditate? Well, maybe there's something just practical I can do that. Maybe I'm meditating at the wrong time of day. Or is there a lot of craving going on? Oh, what's that about? Is there something that I'm missing in my life right now? That that's not being addressed. I'm not being taken care of. So this can be, a doorway into insight about our own present moment state. Oh, like, if a lot of anger is coming up, oh boy, where's that coming from? I mean, I was sitting tonight and I was feeling a lot of sadness, but it was really clear to me. I had just seen something on Twitter about a podcast host, a political podcast host that I follow, that I'm very, feel very connected to. I've listened to him a lot, and that he had something really sad. A lot, his wife had miscarried, and it was like right before, and I was like, oh, so heartbreaking, right? And then I was sitting here, I was like, oh, I'm still feeling sad, and I didn't feel like, oh, I got to get rid of that, like, no, I was just like, oh, it was just like seeing causality, which means then that I don't go, oh, what's going on? Why am I feeling sad? Oh, this is terrible. What I got, it's just like, oh, of course I'm sad because I saw this sad news, and I'm touched by it, and it's okay. I'll just keep breathing and sitting here. I mean, that's really a simplistic example, but this is useful because particularly with the hindrances, they help us to disidentify. They help us to see, oh, this is just happening because of that. It's not because of I'm a bad person, or there's something wrong with me, or I'm flawed in some way. It's like, oh yeah, of course, there's a pandemic. No wonder I feel whacked out, Oh yeah, right. Every once in a while we have to remind ourselves, like about 12 times a day, like why does everything feel so weird? Yeah, okay, it's causality. It's like, it's not me. It's not there's something wrong with me. And this is the great, I don't know if I want to call it curse, but certainly challenge of human existence, is that we are individuals in a way, and we certainly feel separate. but we turn that into such a story that we lose sight of the interconnection and of the impersonal nature of our experience. That this is just a body with all the regular parts, and it's an aging body with the regular parts. And so the regular parts are deteriorating because that's what aging bodies do. It's not like, what's wrong with me? Why have I got these wrinkles? It's like, why don't I have any hair? It's not any question, it's not personal. It's like, I am such a failure. Look at that guy. There's a guy who's got lots of hair. What, he's obviously got it together. I'm a failure, um, yeah, and so it's good to look at the hindrances in that way, and in fact, the factors of awakening. Because one of the things that can get in the way of our even looking at and enjoying the factors of awakening, you think, oh well, I don't want to be like egotistical and bragging that I'm like having tranquility or that I'm having joy, or concentration. That'll make it. If I start taking credit for that, it's going to be like, the way my mind goes is like, oh boy, I'm jinxing myself because I just said something good about, myself. And to realize, oh no, it's just if you do this, if you practice meditation and you don't, do harm, and, you put in this amount of time, and that these things just unfold. They're not personal. They don't belong to me. And in fact, the more personally I take them, the less likely they're going to happen, which is, sort of the way it works. And on the other hand, the more personally I take everything, the more I'm likely to have the hindrances. So there you go. So I hope that was helpful. Not too tedious. It felt like maybe it was getting a little dry there, but a few minutes left if anybody wants to chime in or ask a question or make a comment. Happy to hear from you. Oh, Charlie, hey.
Yeah, I could talk about Buddha Analayo's take on the Satipatthana. I could talk about that forever.
We could do a year on that for sure.
I've been doing his Satipatthana meditation for about 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very powerful. One of the things I wanted to mention, I always really, I really like his kind of analogy of the hindrances and the whole. He talks about investigation, but with curiosity.
Yeah.
He likens it to a chess game. So you're kind of going, okay, anger. Let me see. Where did that, and it has that kind of quality of like, let's look at this, but not looking at it like, I'm so bad because I've got anger.
Yeah.
And I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just reading that passage this afternoon, interestingly enough, that chess analogy. Yeah. Yeah. And it's definitely like shifting your point of view, essentially. And you have to be mindful to do it, because otherwise you forget. Like mindfulness is kind of like the thing that reminds you, like, all right, there's another way to look at this. And of course, it's also, having that curiosity, you can see how it can lead to joy, because it becomes interesting. And all of a sudden, instead of it being like this burden, it's like, wow, that's really a trip. Like, look at how that happens. I mean, it's just like any other insight. There's a real revelatory quality to it that's really joyful. Thank you. Thanks for that reminder. That's funny you were bringing that one up. Someone commenting there. Yeah. Yeah, he's teaching an Anapanasati course now. Have you done that, Charlie?
Yeah, I did it right at the beginning when it was actually part of something longer. It was entering the path, and I think there was 3 months of that, or maybe it was 2 months of it was Satipatthana, and then I've been on. Well,
nice.
Yeah,
I've been going through that book. Though it's the project I've undertaken is that I'm reading that book at the same time I'm reading Ajahn Buddhadasa's book on the Anapanasati, and Thich Nhat Hanh's book, and then Ajahn Pasno has just a chapter on it. And I'm doing like a comparative study that is really, really interesting, because some of the terminology, the different teachers interpret certain words pretty differently, that you can get a really different. And anyway, it's challenging to kind of trying to reconcile them all. And then reconcile them with my own experience, which, I think of like they're presenting this nice kind of straight line, like, oh, the 16 steps of the Anapanasati Sutta. And my path is more like, whoop, fell off there. Oh, coming back. Oh, where was, oh, I was out there in the woods for a while. I got lost got really dark. I just had to sleep under a tree, trying to find my way back.
One of the good things about the Anapanas book in audios, both of them, the Satipatthana meditation, and also the his Anapanasati. There's guided meditations that he does. I don't know if you've heard any of those. Those are pretty powerful.
Yeah, I just was starting to download them yesterday. I've sat a couple retreats with him, and when I heard his voice when I downloaded it yesterday, I was like, oh, that voice! Like, as you know, his guided meditations, he uses a very unusual sing-song voice that I think I had a moment of aversion to it yesterday. Then I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to have to reacclimate myself to this, because they're beautiful. I know. But it's probably better for me right now to read them than to listen to him. I'll get over that. Yeah. He seemed, at least the meditations that I've done with him were very simple, and the one where he did Satipatthana, where it was just like going through the body. It was like, what does he do? Flesh, bones, and there's something else. And he just has you very quickly kind of feel the flesh in your body, feel your bones, and it's like 3 seconds on each thing. Really interesting. Any other thoughts before we go? There's no basketball game to go that I have to jump off to watch. So, oh, there we go. Richie, hi.
Hello there. Thank you. I just want you to know, after speaking about your lemon tree in my meditation, I did think of Trini Lopez. So
well, there you go.
That was
happens.
interesting.
Conditionality. See, that's causes
Yeah.
and conditions.
Internal conditions, right? And I just have a question too. If you can spell for me the author that you're speaking about.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for asking that. So we're talking about he's called Venerable, which is just a honorific Naleo. So he is a scholar monk and meditation teacher, but he was a student of Bhikkhu Bodhi. I'll put his name in. And Bhikkhu Bodhi has been quoted as saying that the student has surpassed the teacher. He's quite a remarkable translator because he translates Pali as well as Chinese and I believe Tibetan. So he's able to go through all the different versions of suttas and sutras and he's done the comparative analysis. And then it's just not just intellectual because he's a very deep practitioner. So he's worth reading. His most famous book is just called Satipatthana, The Direct Path to Realization. I'll put the word Satipatthana in here too. And I will now ask if Patrick wants to chime in.
Thank you, Kevin. I've been exposed to the Dharma really long ago, kind of by accident at Fort Mason. I was wondering if Vincente was in North Berkeley. Is that lemon tree in North Berkeley?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I used to live around the corner on Ocean View. So,
nice.
A long time ago. I haven't lived there this century.
I've only lived here. Well, we moved in '99, but I'm going to say mostly this century.
Yeah, well, I started in Berkeley in 1953 and left in 2000. So I miss it terribly. I used to have a post office box down right next to Pete's there.
Where are you now?
I'm in Sacramento County. I'm up on the American River, which is a photograph of mine behind me.
Yeah,
around the corner from me, which keeps me sober and serene.
Very nice.
But the thing that I wanted to mention. See, you're speaking mostly of what are the Hinayana schools, the southern schools.
Yeah, we don't use that word anymore, but yes.
Well, okay. My practice is vaguely different at what my shreds of practice. It was just that I was first exposed to the Tibetan schools in the 60s, really, as that Dharma started to come over, and also Lama Kunga and some of your other neighbors. It was just, and also I was given a copy of Chogyam Trungpa's mind training in rehab. And just the quote that I came across, the slogan. So I reordered this book. I haven't had a drink this century since that rehab, even though they threw me out halfway through. But there was a line in there, one of the slogans, and slogans we use in AA in recovery all the time. I link up the live, let live, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I link them up into one line which says live easy, but think first. And which points to mindfulness. And I've been experiencing the sameness of the traditions and the teachings in both teachings, though my AA Sangha doesn't really realize what's going on with my Buddhist Sangha and vice versa, So, but right. that one line, meditate first on that which causes the most resentment. It was one of the lists of things. I love the lists. Sometimes I get tired of them, the 7 this and the 8 that's, and 4, 8. How many folds are there? Right? It's like there's a lot of numbers in Buddhism besides 108.
Indeed.
But this is my first time here. Thank you for
Oh.
bridging the gap between the two, in whatever form you do it.
Yeah.
I think that I'm told that there was a Tibetan Lama who gave teachings to Bill W. And I don't have that. I don't have chapter and verse on that. But if he was given the teachings, and the steps and the teachings are pretty much it's the same stuff. And I see that more and more every day, because I do the meditation in the morning, and I do I go into a Zoom meeting at 7 in the morning often. So I'm thoroughly in touch with, at least in the morning, until somebody crosses my path in an automobile on the highway,
Right.
or something, and I'll fall back into not mindfulness. Not
There is that, yes, tendency.
and the kleshas or the hindrances rear their ugly head so quickly. And that's something I'm struggling with, is how mellow I can be, and what a great practitioner I can be when I think I am. And of course I'm not. The Bodhisattva path is a twisted one.
Yeah, I guess I think it's interesting when we really get quiet, we can actually develop aversion to anything that interrupts our quiet, and so that we can actually get more irritable when we're very peaceful. At least that happens to me at times. When I get into a really nice space, and basically what's happening is I'm getting attached to the quiet, right? I'm not really being mindful. I'm being attached to this is really nice. I want to hold on to this. You're disturbing it. Hey, you're fucking with my serenity, man. Oh yeah,
that was... your little bell went off.
Yeah.
It's like, you weren't done with the meditation. I heard a little bell, and I was like, okay, what's that? I was having such a good time here.
Yeah.
Just let me breathe a little more.
Right. Leave me alone. Stop talking. No, I'm not. No, I mean, people sometimes want that from guided meditation. Like, they don't want a guided meditation, which I understand, because I like quiet. But I'll just say, to be a little more clear about my background, that most of my meditation training, it started with insight meditation with Joseph Goldstein and Jack Kornfield, and 40 years ago, and then over time, it's gotten more focused on particularly Theravadan Buddhism. So there's more sutta study that I do and bring in these days, but it's still very much, I'm associated with Spirit Rock Meditation Center and that school. So I'm really not at all trained in either Tibetan or Mahayana Zen or anything. I'm somewhat familiar, but I like the simplicity of all that. And I was just reading Thich Nhat Hanh, made that bridge between Mahayana and Theravada teachings, and he emphasized that he thinks that more Mahayana practitioners should study the Theravadan suttas, that they kind of think that they can sort of skip that, like the foundational stuff of the concentration and mindfulness, and that they can sort of go on to.
We want to go straight to transformation, dude.
Yeah, right. So good luck with that. Yeah. But thank you, and nice to have you.
Thank you.
And I think we will call that a night. And I will be back here on Tuesday morning at 10. And I think that's it. I don't have any teaching this weekend. So more time for sports. So good night. Stay safe. And see everybody soon.